Throughout human history, we have demonstrated a particular fascination with, of all things, masks. The ability to conceal our identity and slip into an alternate reality is a pastime we find both amusing and rather magical. Originally used for rituals and ceremonies, the oldest known mask is from 7000 BC, though the word mask didn't appear in English until the 1530s, stemming from the Middle French masque, M-A-S-Q-U-E that is, meaning covering to hide or guard the face, derived from medieval Latin masca, meaning specter or nightmare. The concept of masks is entrenched in both hallowed and haunted history alike. Suffice it to say, we have a long and storied history with turning ourselves into something else. Why this enchantment with masks, you might ask? Well, for starters, masks are believed to connect us with the divine. In West Africa, they have historically been used in ceremonies to communicate with ancestral spirits. In shamanic rituals, they are donned to connect man, spirit, and nature, and even play an essential role in the rather shadowy practice of exorcising evil spirits. Masks also titillate us. In ancient Greece, masks were used in theater, helping to exaggerate expressions, texturize the characters, allow actors to transcend multiple roles and even genders, and most practically, help audience members in faraway seats to see the theatrics more closely. Fast forward a few millennia, and masks were used in Renaissance theater to capture the mysterious and miraculous. Masquerade balls were particularly popular in Italy during the 16th century, with members of the Venetian upper class donning elaborate disguises whilst partaking in all sorts of rambunctious festivities. Today, they are donned by children on All Hallows' Eve with the intent of stirring up dread, laughter, and all manner of trickery in between. And of course, it wouldn't be a 2021 podcast without mentioning masks also protect us. Celebrated as both a defender of the masses and a symbol of suppression, we can say without question that our human legacy with masks is becoming ever more complex. But masks also have a dark side. They conceal, they deceive, and we could argue that they also cover up a certain unflattering truth, that perhaps we don't really know who we are. Even though we celebrate masks as a symbol of ritual, protection, comedy, and all manner of theater, we have a paradoxical relationship with them. In horror movies, the mask is a pervasive symbol that inevitably accompanies gore and violence, obscuring the faces of slashers, villains, Hannibal Lecters, phantoms, burglars, and terrorists alike. When we put up a wall between us and another, disguising our identities and veiling our truth, we can throw the human mind into a bit of a panicky tailspin. Without the ability to discern who or what is under a mask, how can we know what's really real? How can we know who we are? Psychologists who study dreams believe masks are a symbol of trying to be someone that we are not, of a truth that is being hidden, of attempting to impress or deceive others, or hide our genuine feelings and emotions. In short, the mask represents a pervasive, age-old fear that we are the frauds, charlatans, or bad guys. that we are imposters. Hi, I'm Jessica Carson, and welcome to Patina, a podcast that examines the surprising beauty of all that is dark, shadowy, and seemingly tarnished about the human experience. Let's play. Imposter syndrome is a psychological phenomenon characterized by a doubt around our skills, talents, or accomplishments. Those of us with imposter syndrome feel as though our successes, whether fancy credentials, paychecks cashed, or promotions earned, are not a result of our own competencies, but are instead due to foolish oversight by others or pure dumb luck. It is as if we are wearing a mask that will dissolve at midnight and reveal our true identities as something far less glorious than others believe. For those of you who are wondering if you struggle with imposter syndrome, here are a few dead giveaways. You feel the need to be special or the best. You have a crushing fear of failure, as well as a paradoxical guilt around success. You doubt your own abilities, and when you do receive praise, you rather frustratingly discount it. I don't know about you, but I would say these qualities are pretty darn characteristic of my personality. While it's pretty easy to see how imposter syndrome would come into play in the workplace, it manages to creep and crawl its way into a wide variety of our life contexts. It's common in academic settings, social interactions, romantic relationships, and any environment that's new, novel, and needing proof of our capacity to excel within it. If you've ever felt as though you weren't good enough to be in a relationship with a certain romantic partner, or that you've earned a graduate degree but still have no clue what the hell you're doing, you may very well have imposter syndrome. Welcome to the club. In a just world, imposter syndrome would affect individuals who don't try hard enough or who lack the work ethic or honesty to achieve meaningful success. But as is often the case when it comes to matters of the human mind, imposter syndrome presents a disconcerting conundrum. You see, imposter syndrome rarely affects those of us who might deserve to feel fraudulent in our success. It rarely affects the deceptive or opportunistic among us, and instead tends to afflict the most intelligent, capable, and unique among us. In a rather cruel plot twist, imposter syndrome is most pervasive among the personalities that strive for merit, for mastery, and for meaning. Once upon a time, there was a man who accomplished it all. With a mind both philosophical and scientific, he provided empirical evidence for the atomic theory, proposed the theory of relativity, solved the riddle of the photoelectric effect, and was granted the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1921, among many, many other notable accomplishments. And yet, this man uttered the following completely contradictory assessment of his success. Quote, "The exaggerated esteem in which my life work is held makes me very ill at ease. I feel compelled to think of myself as an involuntary swindler." End quote. This man, whose name is literally synonymous with genius, is of course Albert Einstein. In the annals of history, there are few, if any, figures more capable than Einstein, and yet he used the term swindler, the last term that would come to any of our minds, to capture his relationship with his success. Despite a personality that was naturally intelligent, achievement-oriented, and hardworking, he nonetheless failed to see himself as such. But Einstein is certainly not the only legendary creator to maintain such a paradoxical view of themselves. In an almost comedic reflection, John Steinbeck has stated, quote, "I am not a writer. I have been fooling myself and other people," end quote. Even the much beloved, seemingly infallible Tom Hanks has been caught saying, quote, "If I fake it, that means they might catch me at faking it. And if they catch me at faking it, well, then it's just doomsday." One of the most mind-boggling accounts of imposter syndrome comes from a woman who warmed the hearts of millions with her honeyed words. She wrote poems and memoirs, stood as a legendary civil rights activist, and boasted no fewer than 50 honorary degrees. This most remarkable woman quite literally defines what it means to have both a life of success and a life of meaning. And yet, just like Einstein, she wore a mask. In her words, "I have written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find me out now. I've run a game on everybody, and they're going to find me out." This woman is none other than Maya Angelou. Despite her very fully cemented status in the halls of history and libraries alike, she is a victim of this garden variety, ever-pervasive phenomenon, imposter syndrome. What causes these brilliant-minded, tender-hearted individuals to hold such a distorted view of reality? To see themselves in such stark contrast to the way they are perceived by others? It's a complicated question with a multitude of answers. Research has shown that imposter syndrome is not solely a result of our dispositions and personalities, but also leaches into us from our outside worlds, born of the environments and social interactions that lead us to doubt our abilities and worth. While certain personality characteristics are more prone to imposter syndrome, like those of us who are naturally anxious, depressed, or have low self-esteem, or those of us who excel in self-monitoring, which is the tendency to be ever so aware of yourself, often to your own detriment, there are also many early life experiences that can make us susceptible to imposter syndrome as adults. I'm going to list a few out for you now, and just a fair warning to my perfectionists out there, you may be triggered by what you're about to hear. Those of us who suffer from imposter syndrome as adults were frequently told we were smart, talented, responsible, sensitive, and good as a child. Teacher's pet, anyone? You likely received a lot of attention for your successes as a child, whether that was in the classroom, on the sports field, or in some other arena where you were somehow directly stacked against your peers. If you suffer from imposter syndrome as an adult, you also may have had parents who were overprotective or had particularly high expectations. You might have also found yourself in academic situations in which you were not as prepared as your classmates, whether due to a difference in age or change of schools, that nonetheless made you feel as though you had to work far harder to keep up with those around you. And as a kicker, you might have been probed and questioned as to why you were admitted into a particular school, extracurricular activity, or other hobby. Seemingly innocent questions like, how did you get into that amazing school? I hear it's impossible to get into. Or, whoa, you made the team? I didn't know you were that serious about football. Manage over a lifetime to burrow their way into our psyches and make us question ourselves, even to this day. But perhaps the greatest experiential trigger of imposter syndrome is being a minority. Anyone who is in some way a minority, whether through gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability, or just being wired a bit differently, will naturally be more prone to imposter syndrome. For example, female leaders often feel as though they are imposters because they do not match the stereotype of a good leader that possesses predominantly masculine traits. While a female's warmth and compassion may in fact make her a better leader, she may nonetheless feel as though she is inadequate because she fails to meet the accepted stereotype. In fact, this engendered imposter syndrome is so powerful that there are many historical tales of people quite literally becoming imposters to overcome this perceived inadequacy. Take, for example, Franklin Thompson, a Union Civil War soldier who heroically fought in a number of battles, including First Bull Run, Antietam, and Fredericksburg, serving a wide range of roles, including field nurse, mail carrier, and even spy. But in 1863, Franklin contracted malaria and deserted his regiment. To be clear, Franklin didn't desert his brothers out of cowardice or disloyalty. No, he was worried that if he went into treatment at a military hospital, they would learn that he wasn't all that he seemed to be. The truth was, Franklin Thompson was one Miss Sarah Edmonds. Sarah's story, for better or for worse, is not unique. Historians have estimated that 400 to 1,000 women battled in the Civil War alone as imposters, pretending to be men. Quite fittingly, when the term imposter syndrome was introduced in 1978 by Dr. Pauline Clance and Dr. Suzanne Imes, it was within the scope of a study on 150 high-achieving women. These women had been recognized for their professional excellence and had exceeded all academic expectations. And yet, they explained their success as a result of luck, and others overestimating their abilities. Over the years, research on imposter syndrome has indicated that high-achieving women are but one of many groups prone to this peculiar phenomenon, with just as many high-achieving men experiencing the phenomenon as well. But now, back to minority imposter syndrome. In a similar way, individuals from ethnic groups that are often stereotyped as being unintelligent, lazy, or underachieving are more likely to worry that their admission to a prestigious university or coveted job was the result of luck or a recruiter's sympathy, instead of an objective, well-deserved placement. And it's pretty easy to understand why ethnic minorities might feel this way. For example, only 3.2% of senior leadership roles in large US-based companies are staffed by Black professionals. And as a result, approximately 2/3 of Black professionals feel they need to work harder than their white peers to advance. Exacerbating these feelings is the fact that Black professionals often lack access to higher-level managers, lack professional development resources, experience wage gaps, and work in a culture that is often built around white identities. It begs the question, wouldn't you feel like an imposter too? In my own life, imposter syndrome reared its ugly mask when I was working in venture capital. At the time, I was a young, ambitious 20-something-year-old woman who had just entered the epitome of a masculine role. Not only is venture capital notoriously male-dominated, but everything about it reeked of the masculine archetype. It was all about logic and practicality and aggression and black turtlenecks. And so, as a young woman in an all-male office, I was quite noticeably a minority. And this was a recipe for imposter syndrome. I was constantly terrified about being found out as a fraud. And while I obviously feared failure in the role, I also feared success. Because, after all, with more success came more opportunities to demonstrate what I felt to be a lack of knowledge and skills. I wanted so badly to do well and fit into the office culture that I became an entirely foreign version of myself. I developed a sharp tongue, aggressive tendencies, hyper-rational approach, and literally even changed my wardrobe to a much more stoic style, simply so that I wouldn't be discovered as an imposter. And the greatest irony in all of this, the less of an imposter I seemed to my colleagues, the more of an imposter I seemed to myself. It only became clear in hindsight that this game of charades came at the highest cost: my own authenticity. And so it seems imposter syndrome, sometimes playing out more literally than others, can make us do and believe some pretty wild things. But here again, we must remind ourselves of the common thread across those of us who identify with imposter syndrome. These are not people who are bad or broken, and they are certainly far from lazy or incapable. Instead, they are high achievers who wish to do well, be loved, find meaning, and create a life worth living. It is an infamous theatrical scene that many of us are familiar with. Christine rips the mask from the Phantom, exposing a grotesquely deformed face, a defiant act that prompts him to drag her into his dark, subterranean lair. In the play's climactic moment, Christine insists that she does not fear his tarnished appearance, but rather his inner nature. Having experienced kindness, the Phantom falls in love with Christine and compassionately releases her. In the play's final moments, the Phantom is unjustly pursued by an angry mob, but manages, at the very last moment, to disappear. Only his mask remains. When Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote the plot for Phantom of the Opera, we can imagine he understood the magnitude of the symbolism he was dealing with. We all possess shadows, shame, sensitivities, scarlet letters, and suffering that we, to varying degrees, prefer to cover with masks of our own. But herein lies the great tragedy and supreme hopefulness inherent in imposter syndrome. When the mask of imposter syndrome is removed, it is not a deformed face, grandiose failing, or a supreme ineptness that is revealed. Instead, what is revealed is a remarkably high-potential personality who has simply failed to see themselves as such. What kind of world would we live in if those of us with imposter syndrome were immediately stripped of our ghoulish, parasitic fear that our success is due to just being in the right place at the right time, or getting really lucky, or, the recruiter just felt sorry for me? Because the truth is, those of us who are more likely to tell ourselves these myths are arguably the most capable of brilliance and success. The greatest barrier we will ever face in our quest for greatness is, cruelly and ironically, ourselves. And so, while humility is lovely, growth orientation is grand, and productive self-critique is undoubtedly a boon, it is perhaps the responsibility of each and every one of us to peel back our own masks and reveal the true nature of what we are trying to hide behind, and why we feel the need to hide behind it in the first place. We may very well be surprised to learn that what we are most fearful of is not our darkness, but is instead the very best, very brightest version of ourselves. That's all for today's episode of Patina, written and produced by me, Jessica Carson, with support from my partner in crime, Jeffrey Sayers. With any luck, it's helped you to look into the shadowy, seemingly tarnished aspects of your human experience with a bit more hope and a lot more curiosity. If you like Patina, I think you'll really enjoy our other offerings at the Magnum Opus Academy. From online courses, to books, to group and individual coaching and consulting, we warmly invite you as a seeker to dive deep with us on all that is beautiful about the shadows within yourself, your company, and our society at large. So give us a follow and drop us a note on how we can play together. After all, the shadows are a lot more friendly when we play.